Welcome back to another marvelous video, or should we say back in time? Marty McFly and Doc Brown had a good run starting all the way in the 80s, didn't they? The 1880s, that is. While no one really wants to talk about the Back to the Future musical, today is your lucky day. Well, jokes aside, whenever we talk about the Back to the Future trilogy, it never fails to evoke that warm, fuzzy sense of nostalgia, of a time when Hollywood gave us science fiction with excellent storytelling, rather than focusing more on the movie's shiny exterior and fancy effects. Even today, franchises have the tendency to pump out sequel after sequel as an attempt to remain relevant in the pop cultural zeitgeist, all but the Back to the Future franchise. So, let's find out why. Now, before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means an awful lot. Thank you, and let's begin.
What the hell?
Revisiting a cult classic trilogy. Now, before anything else, let's do a quick recap of the OG Trilogy. It all began when esteemed filmmaker Robert Zemeckis and screenwriter Bob Gale created the first installment of the franchise Back to the Future, which came out in 1985. This film soon became the highest-grossing film of the year. It allowed the misadventures of Marty McFly, played by beloved actor Michael J. Fox, along with the eccentric scientist Dr. Emmett, or simply Doc Brown, portrayed by Christopher Lloyd. In the first film, 17-year-old Marty first meets Doc Brown when the mad scientist invented his swanky time-traveling DeLorean. This car was powered by 1.21 gigawatts sourced from a plutonium-fueled flux capacitor. It turned out that the scientist had actually stolen this plutonium from Libyan terrorists with a false promise of making them a bomb, a promise that was the death of him, well, at least in 1985. In a terrified attempt to escape the same fate, Marty floored the DeLorean to 88 miles per hour, which hurtled him back to 1955. In this decade, Marty's mother, Lorraine, nearly fell for him, which threatened his very existence. Marty had to play matchmaker for his parents, which definitely wasn't weird for him or anything. He also ensured that his father, George, stood up to his bully and future supervisor, Biff Tannen. Lastly, he slipped a note to 1955's Doc Brown to save his future self from a grisly death. Seeing the success of the first film, which is now considered a cultural touchstone of its time, the creators decided to greenlight two more movies. The second and third films were back-to-back productions, which hit the big screens in 1989 and 1990. By the end of the first film, Marty had already tasted the thrill of time travel and solved his parents' mess for them, but little did he know that he and his girlfriend would have to run into the future in order to save their kids. The year was 2015, and Marty swooped in just in time to save his son, Marty Jr., from being involved in a robbery gone wrong by, guess what, Biff Tannen's grandson, Griff. Biff, from 2015, got his hands on the damn Sports Almanac, which helped his past self from 1955 to make an easy fortune. Back in Marty's present, he found that his home wasn't where it used to be. Biff used his financial gain to convert Courthouse Square into a tacky casino. Here, Marty realized that Biff had killed his father and forced his mom to marry him, so Doc Brown and Marty McFly traversed back in time to fix yet another mistake. Somehow, they avoided severely damaging the space-time continuum, and by the end of the second film, Doc Brown ended up in 1885, while Marty was thrown back in 1955. The third and final film of the franchise began in the Wild Wild West. Unbeknownst to his soon-to-be fate, Doc Brown was living out his fantasy of being a blacksmith in the 1800s. At the same time, Marty found out that Doc Brown would be shot by Biff Tannen's great-grandfather, Buford Tannen, aka Mad Dog. The duo fled and attempted to power up their stalled time-traveling car with a Palace Saloon's potent whiskey by using it as gasoline. Marty managed to travel back to his present, but Doc Brown stayed back with his school teacher, with whom he fell head over heels in love with, Clara Clayton. Even though the trilogy ended with the DeLorean being blown apart, Doc Brown continued traveling across time with a sweet little family. Now, the end of the trilogy did not mean the end of the franchise. Back to the Future expanded its universe by adding on a short film, a musical, an animated TV show, and even a video game. But the question still remains:
We're gonna have to figure out a way to trust each other.
Bring back in, please.
Will we be getting another sequel? Well, the short answer is probably not. According to the creators of the franchise, the first Back to the Future film was conceptualized by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale as a standalone film. It was a box office success, making a whopping $212 million at the box office. Although the following two sequels weren't as popular as the first one, the whole trilogy still stands unmatched. Over the last decade or so, we've seen that rebooting classic franchises and legacy sequels is the most popular and lucrative route. Take a look at the most recent Ghostbusters movie or even the Scream franchise. As for Marty McFly and Doc Brown, there were a couple of reasons why we won't be seeing a sequel anytime soon. Robert Zemeckis told audiences that Universal Pictures, which was the production house tied with the franchise, has been more than encouraging for a sequel. However, the two creators made it clear that they had no desire to create another Back to the Future movie. They went on to clarify the rights of the movie, explaining that the two have an exact understanding with Steven Spielberg, who was integral to the creative team and his production company Amblin Entertainment. The agreement was no more sequels. Alright, well, let's look at it from a narrative viewpoint. The story was nicely wrapped up within the trilogy. Marty McFly managed to secure his future by saving his family from financial ruin, while Doc Brown found love and continued honing his craft. The concept of time traveling gives us endless possibilities of even crazier adventures. Some of these were explored in the animated TV show. With that being said, Zemeckis and Gale believed that the three films were a complete story. Adding on to that would be unnecessary and would be a tactless cash grab. Are we forgetting how much money the first film raked in? According to the creators of the franchise, the only way we'll be getting a Back to the Future 4 is over their dead bodies. Yikes. But it's a respectable wish, one we hope greedy production houses don't try to desecrate. Even so, the creators poked fun at the fact that Universal Pictures might try to get a sequel once they're dead, unless their respective estates find a way to stop that from happening. The two also mentioned how legacy sequels face constant comparison to the originals. It's been decades since the original trilogy first hit the screens. There's really no reason to drag the story out for a mediocre sequel, though it's also a moral line that the creators of the franchise are not willing to cross. Now, look at the integral parts of these movies. The characters. Say the creators did come around to making a fourth Back to the Future film, they would want most of the original cast to play their role. Sadly, shortly after the release of the third film, Michael J. Fox, who played Marty McFly, was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He recently quit acting while doing good work of raising awareness for this degenerative disorder by establishing the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's disease. Can you imagine a Back to the Future movie without Michael J. Fox? Back in 2020, Bob Gale clearly said, if we went back and made another one, we'd have Michael J. Fox, who will be 60 next year, and he has Parkinson's disease. Would we want to see Marty McFly at age 60 with Parkinson's disease? Did we want to see him at age 50 with Parkinson's disease? I'd say no, we don't want to see that. And you don't want to see Back to the Future without Michael J. Fox. People say, well, do it with somebody else. Really? What are you going to get? Well, what if a sequel did happen? Remember, the creative rights of the OG franchise are tightly guarded by its creators, as they should be. Alright, but we can still dream, right? What could be the plot of a hypothetical fourth movie even be? As we mentioned earlier, time travel opens endless possibilities for what could go wrong. After all, tinkering with a space-time continuum is a tricky business. As we saw in the 2015 short film Doc Brown Saves the World, which starred mainly Christopher Lloyd. Oh, and what if, along a similar vein, we get a spin-off series that follows the fervent experiments of Doc Brown as a young eccentric scientist advancing his research in time travel. A failed experiment could cause temporal glitches or anomalies in Hill Valley. It would cause people and animals from across all time periods to show up in the same place at the same time. So imagine Hill Valley being overrun by dinosaurs from the Cretaceous period trying to chase down flying cars running on biofuel. On the other hand, the only acceptable sequel at this point would be a total remake with whole new characters and an original storyline. Maybe the sequel could follow Biff Tannen more closely, who is in bid for his revenge, could abuse Doc Brown's new time-traveling locomotive like he's done before. What if a bitter Biff went into the future to fiddle around with a new temporal crisis? But this time, Doc Brown's wife and two sons would be at risk. Or they could go the classic yet predictable route of featuring Marty McFly's children as the protagonists. If a sequel were to be made today, the narrative storytelling would have to address the larger issues of our time. So it could follow the journey of a character from the past using Doc Brown's genius time-traveling method to arrive into our present. But to the time traveler's dismay, the future is nothing like they'd imagined. The world has just gotten worse for wear, and humanity seems to be regressing instead of advancing forward. Sounds familiar? Marvelous verdict. Well, we've gotten our answer. There are no hopes for a Back to the Future sequel ever. It could be for the best since classic stories like these are meant to be left alone. Either way, the Back to the Future films are a timeless trilogy. The franchise doesn't need to be expanded, improved, or changed one bit. After all, it showed us how we are in charge of our destiny, even if the foreseeable future is a constant subject of change. It really isn't the end of the world until it is. Ha! If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.